This is a clip from Beyond Classified. You can access the entire episode now at rockfin.com/FKN+. From what you're saying, this is big and it's huge and it's every 400 years, and it would make sense how humanity has amnesia over and over, and we can't even get accurate information about our past from even a couple of hundred years ago because our history's been rewritten so much. I want to help the audience understand what happens in space, what is cosmically happening with our sun that is causing this.
We have to look at two different perceptions of what our star is. Is it a fusion-based atomical fire engine up there and fire furnace? Or is it powered from an external source, plasma? And the plasma sheath on the outside of our sun is what you're seeing glowing. So what is it really? Are these Birkeland currents? These currents, think of an electrical line in the sky. And here's the thing that blew my mind too when I started to put this in perspective. You think the electrical line in the sky, you think that the electricity is on the inside, running down that copper on the inside. That copper creates the magnetic field and the electric charge runs on that on the outside of the wire. They're delivering you the electricity. When you break that, like sometimes you'll see people cut it, well, that's everything flowing into whatever handheld instrument you have. So when you're talking about electromagnetic, and it blew my mind that they only create the magnetic field in the wire to let the electricity run down that wire. They're not pushing it. They're creating the magnetic field for it to move. That blew my mind. They're not really sending electricity to you as a push down a copper wire. The magnetic field's delivering it to you. Now, once you put that in perspective, and then you can scale it up to the sun, that whatever is flowing in, these things called Birkeland currents, think of them as gigantic, solar system sized current flows through plasma medium, reaching our star. Well, it seems that in there's an electrical heartbeat. Because you cannot tell me with a straight face that the 11-year solar cycle, when we go to solar maximum and solar minimum on a regular 11 or 11.8 year, I'll be a little more exact, year cycle goes from flaring sunspots to absolute quiet for 2 years on a regular heartbeat pattern. And it's an internally fired star that just magically takes a break every 11 years. Okay, we're not gonna fuse right now. We're gonna chill. You can't tell me that. And then when you go on longer term patterns, you can start to see ebbs and flows of heat and cool, but then we'll take it out to the ice age eras. I'm only talking about the last, say, 12,000 years of the interglacial or the Holocene era. You can see ebbs and flows in there too. There's hot periods, there's cold periods, there's hot periods, there's cold periods. So what is causing that on our sun to flicker in and out? And really what causes it to flicker out so much that we go into 90,000 years of ice compared to where we sit today, where I have green grass and elderberry trees and currant plants growing in my front yard out here. We're going to be covered in ice down here. What changes that? What causes it? Can only be electromagnetic. And this is the whole thing. Once you start to look at this and frame it in that reference of something else is powering our star, it's electrical. It has a frequency to it and it has a mappable frequency. When you're looking at different wave frequencies or wave forms inside sound, we can use acoustics because we're both talking. You can see our voice patterns. When you measure, in science, when it starts to measure electricity, you'll start to see, what do you think that EKG is in people's hospital rooms? We talk about virus, we can talk about hospitals. Okay, you got your heart plugged up to something. What's it doing? It's making that frequency when your heart beats. And when it beats, it makes the beat. Think about our sun with a heartbeat also, but externally, like your house is externally powered. Our sun, I do believe, is on a Birkeland current flow. I think all the stars are always connected between these filamentary ropes that are twisting in on themselves. So they called it field-aligned currents. Well, these positive, negative current flows come into the stars, and then the local solar system is also affected, the planets. So there's a lot of unanswered questions. And once you frame it into, we know we're going into a low activity, which is going to diminish the amount of food grown on the planet, and I'm going to roll back into the same thing again. But what happened in history, that we lost history. We lose history so much. It's hard, and me doing the research, I found it so incredibly difficult to find anything prior to 800 AD that was very solid in terms of anything. There was billions of people that had lived from that time, from let's say the year 0 until the year 800. There were more than 1 billion people that came into this world and died. And we still have barely any records. And go further back, it's like, oh, here's a piece of rock, and let's fill in the rest. And your channel sums it up perfectly. Forbidden knowledge news. And forbidden knowledge is where we sit with this Birkeland currents, because the same thing, we could power our devices from the ether itself without having to use electrical wires. We could be using the same thing Tesla and Marconi, Dr. Brown, many others had pushed into on powering something from that same current flow that exists around us in all space.
Now, it makes me wonder how far back these elites, these individuals that think they control the planet, have known about this and have been kind of surviving these cycles and then restarting civilization under false history, false information, just to keep us in that same darkness that they've kept us for maybe thousands of years, because they've been the ones in control. They've been the ones knowing these cycles are occurring, and they may come out of it on the other end a little better than everyone else because they've been better prepared for it. What do you think about that, and how far back do you think these multi-generational bloodlines, you could say, have been in control of this?
3,500 years at the minimum. Now you have to understand what is happening with continuity of government and how that affects our food prices and rail deliveries and barges that have gone missing and a lot of things in the supply chain breakdown. This narrative is the supply chain breakdown, is it not? Oh, things aren't delivered here. Nothing's running on time. Ships are here. Oh, things are off. Factories are closing. Or you could look at it as these elite that had the same amount of power are still pumping it out. But when you lose 25% of all the rail carriages across the United States, where did they go? North America just lost 25% of its rail cars. For me, they're being packed up and sent underground. What happened to all the shipping containers? Hapag-Lloyd had to order 1.5 million new 40-foot or 53-foot shipping containers. Where does 1.5 million shipping containers go? You can't tell me that they're all sitting on boats waiting to offload on China. That's a great excuse. But 1.5 million containers packed full of essentials like anything that could repair electrical equipment. How about new capacitors, transistors, anything larger that we get out to move electricity across cities, transformers. So can you imagine the continuity of government if you really knew this cycle was here and you controlled all industry and all banking like it is now? There's just a few families that control all of it and everybody else steps in line. It's like they're trying to appease an entity, is really, in my opinion. They're trying to appease the entity that they worship, trying to appease it. Whatever it is, that everybody flows in, and now all resources are directed toward that continuity of, I'm not even going to say government, I'm going to say continuity of entity or continuity of family money. Whatever it is that this force that drives these groups of people. So don't believe the supply chains have just broken down because of COVID. That's a great excuse, but I think a lot of it's being packed up. And here's my last thing, Chris. Like the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, we'll talk about this in a second. They are not going to be able to deliver for their corn contracts this year because the pledged deliveries are, I want it for sure, is the record most in history. And it actually exceeds the amount of corn that they can get this year. Because, paper trades can go way deeper than actual physical. This is where they're going to get bit in the butt because they got so much paper out there on corn contracts, but now a huge amount of the papers is going to turn into physical. And they're like, whoa, that 100 to 1, that just broke the bank. But here's the thing. If you take delivery, you're going to want to get it on flat barges and try to get it down the Mississippi through the lock system to take it out into a loading terminal. St. Louis, for example, there's a whole bunch of loading terminals down the Mississippi. You don't have to go down to Louisiana. But there's a barge shortage too. And I'm like, how can there be a barge shortage? Dude, it's a square thing that floats on there. Is it really that difficult to build more square things that float on the water that don't even have motors? You push them with the tug. Like how difficult it is to build a square thing. These things baffle me.
Well,
I'm
I
just going to
grew up
ramble,
in
so I'm going
South
to stop.
Louisiana near the ports and near New Orleans, and there was a ridiculous amount of Like, I don't think we could have ever run out of the barges just in that area of Louisiana alone. I mean, I'd walk down like streets or drive down roads and see miles and miles and miles of just barges. So that to
Yep.
me is extremely ridiculous. It's like creating an illusion of scarcity so that they can pretty much come out on top and have everything they need, and screw us.
See, that's how they retain the power. Because if you were able to have a full working society, at least at the level where we are now, and you were able to maintain that by stockpiling everything of the apex of the society to bring you through, and kept all the advances of what's not public yet, probably 30, 50 years in advance, and you put all that underground, and then you just waited and you emerged again, you would still be the top pinnacle families and the top pinnacle elite. Just you're reemerging as a full functional society, and the rest of everybody got set back 50 years into more of a agrarian, say, pioneering lifestyle. And these guys are popping out with the, electrovigrivics, weightless craft, and like, you will worship us now.